Have you ever lost something that was really important to you, like your phone, or maybe your very favorite stuffed animal as a kid, or like an entire school project that you spent days and weeks working on? Something that you were about to say, and then it slipped your mind and you lost that thought? There are tons of reasons why we lose things. Sometimes it's because we're careless. Sometimes we lose things because we're distracted. We all know how frustrating it is to lose something that is valuable to us. But sometimes it's not just our phones or our homework that gets lost. Sometimes it's us. Sometimes we're the ones who feel lost. We might get lost in the things in life that we are trying to navigate. We can get lost in a city. We can get lost in a math problem that has approximately 1 billion steps, or that is new or confusing. The feeling of being lost is really scary. It's so disorienting. Whether you wander away from your parents when you're a kid in a store and you feel lost, or you're driving in a new place and you take a wrong turn and you're like, oh gosh, I have suddenly no idea where I am. Or you lose track of your friends when you're out and you're like, I came here with people and now I have no idea where the people are. It can be scary to realize that you don't know where you are. You don't know who to ask for help. You don't know how to get home again. For the next few weeks, we're going to be talking about lost things and how they get found. But this won't be a tutorial on like how to find your childhood stuffed animal that you lost that one time. We're going to be talking about all the ways that we can get lost, and then how we can help others when they're getting lost, and how we can all get found again. In the journey of following Jesus, there are going to be times when you feel lost. I know that's true for me, and I know that it's true for many other people that I know that have been following Jesus for a long time. When it comes to your faith, there are lots of reasons why you might feel lost sometimes. See, you and I were created to walk closely with the God that loves him. That's that feeling of being found, right? When we feel like we're right next to God and we have that close relationship. But you might feel like you don't know how to connect with God, or you actually question whether or not God can be trusted. Or some of you might feel a bit lost because you're wandering around making decisions that you know are unwise, and you feel like you've probably turned your back on God. Or you might feel lost because you're struggling with what you believe, or with a difficult situation that you're in, or with your mental health. In all of these situations, we can feel pretty lost and disoriented sometimes, like we have no bearings of how to get back home in our faith and in our relationship with God. Wouldn't it be nice if we could just use like a navigation app to help us find our way when we're lost in life? The same way that we would do if we were driving to a place we had never been to. Like, where are the Waze, Google Maps, Apple Maps of life, right? Like, our navigation apps are fantastic, right? They tell us all sorts of important things. Like, they tell us exactly what to do and when. They tell us how to avoid roadblocks, how to avoid danger. They tell us exactly how long it's going to take us to get to our destination. They automatically reroute us back on track anytime we make a wrong turn. Wouldn't it be nice for us to have a navigation app for our lives? Something that tells us exactly what decisions to make and when. Something that helps us avoid setbacks. Something that gives us a heads up when we are headed towards danger. Something that gives us a peek into the future and tells us exactly what's going to happen and how long it's going to take for it to happen. Something that automatically tells us when we've made a bad decision and then gives us a clearly laid out map as to how to get back on track. Wouldn't it be nice if we had an app that would tell us exactly what to do with our faith? Because let's be honest, sometimes it feels really confusing. It feels really disorienting. Sometimes you may feel like you're wandering away from God, but you're not sure how or why. Like, you might feel like, well, like yesterday or like a couple days ago, I felt like I had an awesome relationship with God, and I just don't feel close to him now. And I've been trying to feel close to him, and I just don't. That I feel far from God. Or other times, you might not feel like you've wandered away from your faith, but you might feel like maybe God has wandered away from you. And then you're like, has God wandered away from me? Does God really care as much as I've been told that he does? If you feel far from God for whatever reason, you might find yourself wondering, who screwed up here? Did I fail God or did God fail me? And what do I do from here? What do I do when I feel disoriented and I'm not sure where the path is that leads back home? Well, for the next 4 weeks, we're going to be looking at one chapter of the Bible, just one chapter, Luke chapter 15. And this chapter recounts several stories that Jesus once told about things that were lost and then found. Each story communicates a different and important truth. Now, these stories are parables, which means they're not historical. Jesus made them up, and he tells them in order to teach an important truth. And so we're going to start today with Luke chapter 15, verses 1 and 2. It goes like this. It says, "Now the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering around to hear Jesus. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, 'This man welcomes sinners and eats with them.'" So you can already tell that those Pharisees are pretty salty, right? Well, the Pharisees of Jesus' day were religious leaders who were super focused on God's rules and hundreds of laws that were contained in Jewish scripture. Now, these laws were important and they're not inherently bad. In fact, they were given by God to help God's people to stay safe and healthy and close to God. These laws helped people to not get lost. But in Jesus' opinion, the Pharisees were going too far. Why were they going too far? Because they were so focused on abiding by the laws that they lost track of the people in the process. They wanted people to follow every law exactly, and they had become arrogant and self-righteous and judgmental and dismissive of people who they believed were sinful because they weren't following every law. The Pharisees were obsessed with following God's laws that they missed God's heart. Jesus was often so frustrated with the Pharisees for their lack of love and mercy and compassion for others because they couldn't see that these laws were for the good of people. These laws weren't to go around making everybody feel awful about themselves. To the Pharisees, Jesus just seemed like he was breaking lots of God's rules because he would do things like heal people on the Sabbath day, which was of rest, and then share meals with people that the Pharisees called sinners. Instead of dismissing the Pharisees for being jerks, Jesus takes the time to tell them stories because he wants to help them think differently. The first one is about missing sheep, and you can find this in Luke chapter 15, verses 3 through 7. It says, "Then Jesus told them this parable. Suppose one of you has 100 sheep and loses one of them. Doesn't he leave the 99 in the open country and go after the lost sheep until he finds it? And when he finds it, he joyfully puts it on his shoulders and goes home. And then he calls his friends and neighbors together and says, 'Rejoice, rejoice with me. I have found my lost sheep.' I tell you that in the same way, there will be more rejoicing in heaven over one sinner who repents than 99 righteous persons who do not need to repent." We don't know how this sheep wandered away from the shepherd. Maybe it got distracted. Maybe it got confused. Maybe it saw other sheep going that way, so it was like, "I'll go that way too." Maybe the sheep was trying to run away. Either way, the sheep found itself far from the safety of the herd and the shepherd. Imagine how difficult it would be to find a single sheep in a huge desert filled with valleys and steep cliffs. You see, Jesus is painting a mental picture for people that were well acquainted with this culture of herding sheep. They understood that finding that one sheep is going to take a lot of time and effort and attention just for that one sheep. And here's what the shepherd in Jesus' story did. Even though he had 100 sheep to take care of, he noticed when one of them was missing. And I imagine he knew that sheep's name too. Even though he knew it would be difficult to find that one lost sheep, he searched for that lost sheep until he found it. He never gave up, and it was worth it. That one sheep was worth it. When he found the lost sheep, Jesus doesn't say that the shepherd yelled at it and made fun of it and gave it a long lecture and then punished it and told what a bad sheep it was. The shepherd puts the sheep on its shoulders and lovingly carries it home and rejoices. If you and I are wandering, lost sheep, Jesus says God is the good shepherd. And Jesus is God. When you feel lost and disoriented, Jesus notices you. He is seeking you. Sometimes we're all like the sheep in Jesus' story. We wander from the safety of God, our shepherd, and the herd. Maybe we wander from God because we get distracted. Maybe you intended to stay close to Jesus, to stay focused on his heart and what he wants for your life, but there were so many other interesting things that we just kind of forgot he existed. And maybe you're looking up right now out of that distraction and wondering, how long have I been wandering for? Or maybe that sheep wandered off because it got confused. It's okay to have questions and uncertainties about following Jesus. We all do. And those questions turn into confusion that sometimes leads us away from the shepherd. But our questions don't need to lead us away from God. And God is not threatened or irritated by your questions. In fact, it is often by asking those questions and continuing to pursue an answer that will bring you closer to God. And so keep asking them. Or maybe that sheep got lost because it walked away. It made a choice. Sometimes we walk away from our shepherd on purpose. Maybe you've turned your back on God in the past because following Jesus just felt difficult and maybe out of touch with what everybody else was doing. Or maybe you were just no longer interested. Or you were hurt and you blamed God for being hurt. Just like sheep are sheep, you and I, we're human. God knows we are prone to getting lost sometimes. And that's why Jesus describes the Good Shepherd the way that he does. Even though God has created hundreds and millions of people over all of time, God knows each and every one of us by name. When you go missing, he notices and he calls you back home by name. Jesus never stops searching for us. He never gave up on you, and he never will. He recognizes your value. We only look for things that we know are valuable. I have never searched high and low for a paperclip because I know they're everywhere. The things we search for, the things we pursue, are the things we know are valuable. And that's why God will keep pursuing you. When you and I finally realize that we're lost and we need help, God doesn't yell at us, doesn't make fun of us, doesn't punish us. He celebrates when we come home to him. Jesus will always lovingly carry you back home. Just like the shepherd in the parable notices his missing sheep, Jesus notices you. Yes, you. You who are sitting there thinking about how far you have wandered and wondering how on earth you are going to find your way back. Jesus notices you. He knows your name and he calls you by name. You who feel like no one in the world notices you. Jesus notices you and he knows you. You who are still trying to decide what you think about God. Jesus notices you, and he's already decided what he thinks about you, and it's all love. Here are my hopes for you today. I hope that you know that you are worth being found. I hope you leave today knowing that your good shepherd loves you and is excited to welcome you home. I hope that if you feel lost right now, I hope you know that while you may feel lost, that Jesus knows right where you are and that he is pursuing you. If you feel unseen, like no one notices or cares about you, I hope today that you know that Jesus sees you. When you feel lost, Jesus notices you and he pursues you because he knows your value and your worth.